This video is brought to you by Opera. Many people, myself included, have talked about how Pixar has struggled to find its footing these last few years. Lightyear was an embarrassment, and Elemental was so mediocre I actually forgot they put anything out at all last year. When people talk about this rocky new era of Pixar movies, the line for when that era started is pretty blurry, but to a lot of folks it started right after the release of Inside Out in 2015. It may not seem like it these days, but when Inside Out first dropped in 2015, to many people this was the best Pixar film of all time. It was their peak. It's still a great movie, but with time I've come around to thinking maybe it's not the best Pixar movie, but instead the most Pixar movie. Whereas with most of Pixar's best films, you follow a metaphor through a straightforward and gripping story, in Inside Out, the metaphor is the story. But that said, what could have been a severe misfire that felt more like a self-parody of other Pixar films was instead a one-of-a-kind piece of work that is damn near impossible not to feel moved by. I love Inside Out, but at the same time I do have mixed feelings on it. I just rewatched it and thought it was way better than I remember it being, but I also think the fact that the film is so blunt with its messaging that it lacks even the tiniest bit of subtlety is just a little grating at times. I don't feel as enchanted by its storytelling as I do with some of their most iconic work. But now we have Inside Out 2, the inevitable sequel with a plot we could all see coming from miles away. Riley is older, we have more emotions. And if you can't tell, I was a skeptic going into this one. I don't get excited about Pixar sequels. The company's whole appeal to me is the original ideas they bring into the world. The Toy Story and Incredibles franchises aside, they're not known to hit it out of the park with sequels. And Inside Out 2, on paper, seems like it could have been the laziest. And now that I've seen it, I wouldn't say it's lazy, but it's not perfect either. Something I love about the Inside Out movies is how they use simple visuals to communicate bigger ideas, kind of like emojis, which reminds me of today's sponsor, Opera. Opera is an internet browser that is unlike any internet browser that I've used before. Like I was saying, emojis are a simple and effective way of getting a certain meaning across. And Opera has a wonderful feature that allows you to attach emojis to your tabs as a way of customizing and organizing your tabs in a really fun way. I'm a guy who likes to keep a lot of tabs open. I'm a mess. And without emojis, my dock looks pretty headache-inducing. I can easily hover over a tab and add a little emoji to it, which is honestly a lot more enjoyable than I thought it'd be. I'm a filmmaker, I'm pretty picky about how I like things to look, so this feature is pretty addicting. Like with Letterboxd, I picked a little log emoji because, you know, you log films on there. I'm pretty proud of that one. In general, Opera just makes organization a lot more fun. With their tab island feature, instead of having a bunch of tabs open, I can group them into islands. So if I need to upload a video to YouTube but still need the homepage open, I can group them into their own little YouTube island and navigate from there. And from there, I can use the emojis to set one as home and the other with a little arrow for upload. Super easy and fun. You deserve a better browser. Go to the link in the description and download your new favorite internet browser today. To cut to the chase, no, it's not better than the first one, but I do think there are certain aspects about this that I did like more. Like Riley. Now in the first film's defense, she's a kid and she's not meant to be the most complex character, even if we spend the entire film in her complex mind, but any scenes with Riley in the real world felt pretty unseasoned. And the film does get away with this, but if the sequel went down a similar path, I would start to feel a bit like, why should we still care? And thank God they don't. The amount of attention they put towards her character this time around is very refreshing, even if she's a much pricklier character to be around. In general, I was really amazed at how easy the film was able to balance its very large cast of characters, nearly doubling the number of emotions, and you still feel like everyone got a decent amount of screen time, and Riley gets more attention, and it's less than 100 minutes. How did they do it? Guys, this movie is too damn fast. Characters talk like this, and then another says something relatable, but wait, here's another character, and then one last character ends with a really long line that should be over by now, but no, it's still going. Wait, a couple more words. Okay, and music cue. Listen, I know children's attention spans are worse than they've ever been, but let us breathe for a second. Listen, it works. The first 30 or so minutes, they have you locked in. I didn't hear a peep from anyone in the audience. I love it when dialogue sounds musical and like it has a beat to it. This is a quality in all my favorite Noah Baumbach movies too, but after a while, it does just get exhausting. I'm an editor, so I pay more attention to pace and rhythm than I should, but man, it is quite noticeable in this movie. It also just really makes the quote-unquote slow moments stand out. Like the movie is flashing a sign at me, telling me this is the part where you're supposed to cry. The whole thing comes to a grinding halt, and it just feels so sudden and off-putting. It was just a little sloppy for what it was. It's not like the plot is too clunky. I think characters just need to slow down a bit. One thing I will say about the speed is it allowed the humor to really fly. I remember cringing a lot at the humor from the first film. Jokes like, "Thanks, San Francisco, you've ruined pizza." They all just felt very Facebook core, if you know what I mean. But this one has a lot of visual slapstick that, I cannot lie to you, really got to me. Embarrassment's character specifically was so silly to me. I loved every time his big ol' schnoz poked out of his hoodie, and then he had a little butt crack. It's great. It felt in general way more cartoonish than anything I've seen from Pixar in recent years, and it let itself be silly. The anxiety emotion, chugging like 6 energy drinks at once, was such a visually satisfying animation. I love stuff like that. Speaking of the animation, yeah, it's good. They have a couple different animation styles, so people are about to call it the best thing they've ever seen in their life, but I feel like so many animated films have raised the bar and done the blending of styles thing a lot by now, which isn't to say it's bad. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm not going to call it anything groundbreaking. I feel like Spider-Verse did this last year and did it a little bit more interestingly. But still, looking at Pixar's last 2 films, it does feel nice to see them being playful with their animation again. I think the real standout moment is when anxiety really starts to let loose, and it's like a tornado, but it looks so crazy. I can't really say I've seen something like it before. It was just breathtaking to look at. It made that climax feel just that much more powerful. And obviously all the real life stuff is a huge step up in the details, as usual. It's not nearly as flat as the first one. Oh, but speaking of flat, let's get into the meat of this. On one hand, I actually do think the themes Inside Out 2 sets itself up with are more ambitious and challenging to wrap your brain around, at least more challenging than those in Inside Out 1. Instead of dealing out cliche advice to the teens, the film actually has a lot to say about why you shouldn't let your emotions dictate who you are as a person. Your anxiety isn't you, your happiness isn't you, etc. And I think those are really interesting and important themes to teach a younger audience, themes some adults in my life still grapple with. With these films, it's silly to ever expect them to blow your mind with their messaging. We're all adults here. The films are meant to be accessible to kids. They're not going to say anything you haven't already heard before. No, it's about how they communicate those themes that matters. And this film communicates these themes shockingly well. There are so many details to this thing that I really enjoyed. I love that the disruption of the new emotions coming in is a literal wrecking ball through the window. I love that orange, the most anxiety-inducing color, is the anxiety color. I love the little branch visual. That was fun. For pretty heavy concepts, the film tells them so smoothly that even a baby can understand them. But at the same time, adults like me can also look at these ideas in a different way, and it makes you think. Basically, it's the Pixar magic that they nail every single time. I think they do a tremendous job at the communication, but I can't say I felt this one as strongly as I did the first. I will say the first was a lot about what it's like to first realize you're growing up and what it means to let go of part of your inner child. That's a feeling that gets me choked up whenever I think about it. And this one is about being a teen, which does not bring me to tears personally. They do capture this perspective in a very authentic way. It snapped me back to that time in my life, but it also made me think about my life currently and how I could do better. And I'm sure for any teens that see this movie, it'll be a very cathartic experience. I mean, I don't judge a movie, even a Pixar movie, based on if it made me cry or not. That's silly. But I wasn't exactly moved by this. I was more just impressed. While I'm dealing out my issues, I may as well mention that the issues I had with the first one also trickled down into this one, the biggest being the lack of subtlety. It's still very much present, and it's a quality of these films that I just can't get past. Now, I did just go on a whole thing about how well this thing communicates big ideas, and to do that, they do need to be a bit obvious about it all. But at the same time, I do think lines like, "Anxiety, Riley doesn't need you," just spell it out in a way that feels unnecessary when the film is already so good at visually communicating these beats. And for some reason, this one has way more of these kinds of lines than the first. Oh, and no short film? What's that bullshit about? Anyway, I liked Inside Out 2. I liked it way more than I thought I would, clearly. Do I wish it wasn't so brain-rotty in its pacing and a bit subtler with its dialogue? Yes. Is it still the best thing Pixar has made in a while? Also yes. So thanks for watching. Go watch Inside Out 2 and form your own opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.